And now for something completely different. This is not a NuTone intercom. If you look carefully, you'll realize that it's an M&S music and sound master station. And this happens to be a model N350. And the N350 is a middle 80s through early 90s music and sound system. And I actually have some first-hand experience with these because back in the day before I started my business and I worked for the fella who was the big dog NuTone distributor in the San Francisco Bay Area, there was a time in the mid 1980s that he decided to take on music and sound as a product line also. Much to the horror of the NuTone sales rep. Mel was very upset when he walked in the showroom one day and saw all of these brand new music and sound intercom displays up on the wall. The story behind why that happened depends on exactly who you listen to, but I think probably what was going on was the owner of the company was trying to leverage NuTone for a better deal, and he was using music and sound as that leverage point, even to the point that he updated his house and took out his original NuTone, I think it was probably an IMA 406 system, and installed the brand new music and sound N440, one model up from this one, just to tick Mel off and show him how serious he was about selling music and sound. That didn't really last very long. He only had the stuff in the store for maybe a couple of years, and then it all kind of disappeared because he didn't really sell that much. But that's not the point of this video. This video is going to be a teardown video of an M&S N350 master station. Why are we doing this? Because I'm curious. Since I have some first-hand experience with these, and, oops, if we don't knock it over, that would be good. Back in the earlier days of my business, there was a certain amount of music and sound in the greater Bay Area. And every now and then we would get a call from a customer with a model like this. And this was a very popular model back in those days. And they would have some kind of problem with it. And because we had technically an account with Music and Sound, and I knew the sales rep or the sales manager at Music and Sound because he formerly worked at NuTone and all those kind of things, we were able to send master stations back to Music and Sound in Dallas, Texas, and have them repaired for people because that's just the kind of folks we are. I'm kind of curious about this because these had certain inherent problems with them that would happen over and over again. They were pretty predictable. I think they're pretty well made units, but I want to see how these things are actually put together because we get calls on these and I get kind of tired of telling people no, we don't work on them. So maybe it's something that we can do. I have this one kind of jury rigged up right now. The fella I bought it from on eBay, of course, was supposed to send the power transformer for it, but he didn't. And then when I contacted him, he said, oh, I don't know, I think I threw it away. So I have to find a power transformer for it. I have it kind of jury rigged up on a transformer that I had. It's not exactly right, but it's close enough for today. And I've got it powered up. It's not really 1:09 a.m. It's Monday morning, but we'll go ahead and we'll turn it on FM. And it actually kind of plays. It's got really dirty controls and so forth, but you can set the clock, you can tune radio stations. It's a pretty nice, was a pretty nice design back in those days. I'm not going to do an overview on it right now because that'll be coming up later on. I think it was a very popular model when it was new. One of the things that made it very popular, you have to remember this is the mid 1980s. One, it was black and gold. Black and gold was all the thing back in those days. If you remember, when the very first Lexus cars came out, a really popular thing that Lexus owners like to do was to go down and buy all of the gold badges for their cars at LS 400 or LS whatever it was in Lexus, and it was all in gold, and it was the 80s. What are you going to do? Black and gold with a zillion buttons. And zillion buttons in gold, that was it. That was the sell. If you got this with the optional cassette player, which mounted on the wall down below, zillion more buttons. It had green and red LED VU meters on it that bounced around when you played a tape. It was all the hottest thing in the world. They were easy to sell because they were very jazzy looking and people liked all the buttons. So I've got all the miscellaneous moved away. Go ahead and flip it over. Normally I'd put it on a cloth, but it's not in cosmetically the best shape in the world. So let's go ahead and take this rascal apart and see what we've got. So I know there's nothing more exciting than watching a guy unscrew and take an intercom apart, so I'm going to try to go along and explain as I go. I have never taken one of these apart before, so I don't really have any idea what we're going to find, but based on the fact that it was made in the 80s, in fact this one is dated May 1st, 1991, so it's a little later on. This is the AM/FM tuner section. Got this metal shield plate with terminals to connect the antennas, and this looks like it should lift out to some degree. When this set was made, Music and Sound was still in its original location in Dallas, Texas. Music and Sound was started by a fellow named Jim Lemon. I don't know the whole backstory of all of that, but what I have heard is that he was a nice guy, he was a tough businessman, and I have previously done a video on a super early Music and Sound. The model number escapes me at the moment, but they have been around for a long time. The Music and Sound today, although they don't really make much of anything anymore, has no real association with the Music and Sound that made this set, because in the 2000s, Music and Sound was bought by Brown, or actually it was bought by a company called Nortec, which is the company that owned Brown, or owns Brown still, and they seem to have a lot of screws. And after a short amount of time, it was moved lock, stock, and barrel from Texas to Los Angeles. And actually, at that time, they pretty much disavowed, oh, this is good. They disavowed or ignored any, take this plate away, mounting plate for the tuner board. And here's our AM/FM tuner. It looks fairly straightforward. In fact, some of the ICs, this is an LA1245, this is an LA1235, and this is an LA1170. These two for certain are used in a lot of NuTone sets. This one I'd have to look up, but this is a fairly straightforward analog AM/FM tuner. And it unplugs from here, which is kind of nice. Underneath this, we have the main board. This is power supply amplifier section. This looks like audio input. This is where the optional chime module would plug in. And then we've got, this is probably all intercom control down here, backup battery, back of the pods. This is the terminal board section where all the wiring from the remote speakers gets connected. One of the things I never liked about Music and Sound systems were, got to shake out all the bits. One of the things I never liked about them is, so this is a 4-wire system. Actually, back in those days, because they, like most companies, never wanted to lose a sale, a standard N350 is a 4-wire system. However, you were able to order it in a 3-wire version, because if you were updating an original NuTone model, you only had 3 conductors in each cable, so there was a way they modified it. I don't know exactly how they did that or what that was done, but they didn't want to lose a sale, so that's what they did. One of the things I never liked about these was you can have a total of 10 remotes, so you've got 10 screws here, all green for the green wires, and in fact we've got little scraps of green wire left over. Door speaker black goes here, and then the other 3 colors are red, black, and white. They use these large standoffs, so all of the red wires get pushed into this standoff, all of the black wires get pushed into this one, and all the white wires get pushed into this one, and then you tighten down the center screws to scrunch all the wires together. This makes troubleshooting a giant pain in the neck. I know this is probably less expensive than making a terminal board and connectors and all that sort of stuff, but when it comes to troubleshooting, this is just a mess to deal with because you've got to take a lot of it apart to do anything, and that's never really a good idea. So let's see what it takes to get the main board out. It seems to have a lot of screws. And they're all machine screws, which is kind of nice. And it looks like the majority of them have lock washers on them, which is kind of a nice attention to detail. One of the things that people may not actually know is that NuTone and Music and Sound were always fierce and direct competitors. Of course, NuTone, having a much larger product line than Intercoms, so Music and Sound also had central vacuum, primarily, or originally, it was the Philtex brand. Seems like there should be another screw, but not sure. So let's go ahead and take these knobs off, I think. That's not helping. So Philtex is an old brand of central vacuum. That should do that. But it still seems kind of, oh, no, there we go. Oh, there is one more screw right here. So Music and Sound had intercoms and central vacuum. They didn't make Philtex. I believe they bought it from Philtex. I don't know exactly. But there we go. If you get all the screws out, it makes all the difference in the world. So we'll go ahead and see what we can do here. So it's soldered. These are the leads that feed the speaker in the master station. So they're soldered. Let's heat up the soldering iron here real quick and do this properly. So this is actually pretty straightforward. Soldering iron is heating up. It's pretty fast. Beep, we're ready. All right. So we'll unsolder that. And unsolder this. Now we put this aside for a second. And we'll look at the main board. So one of the problems, so this all seems very ordinary and easy. However, this looks like a microprocessor to me. And my guess is that that probably is the microprocessor that controls the display and the tuning, radio tuning, because it has, so here's the controls. So it has a digital clock with digital radio readout, manual up and down tuning, and auto tuning. So it's scan up, scan down. And then there are 6 memory buttons, so you can program 6 AM and 6 FM, and then buttons to set the clock. It has an auto feature, so it'll turn on automatically. I don't remember how all of this works exactly. This was considered fairly advanced for when this first came out. So that's one of the things about Music and Sound and NuTone. Who was ahead in designs depends entirely on how old the models they were making were and when they first came out. When this model first came out, NuTone still was making IMA 303s and IMA 406s, which had analog tuners and were somewhat of an older design. And then these models came out, and that put Music and Sound in front of NuTone from a design point of view. And then shortly after this, NuTone came out with the 3003 and the 4006, and that put them back in first place again, and it was always back and forth and back and forth. As for styling and looks, that's personal preference. Depends on what you like. If you're a jet fighter pilot, you like black and gold with lots of buttons. So one of the problems with these that I know of, and here we have heat marks on the board, and that's some kind of big resistor which I'd have to work on a little bit. The other thing that's interesting about this I just happened to notice is this is a two-sided board. So you've got traces all on this side, but you also have traces all on this side. That makes this more of a complex board. And of course, one of the things about music and sound, and the reason that sets got sent back to Dallas for repair, was all repairs on all of their master stations were done at the factory in Dallas, Texas. Music and sound never had a network of service centers that were authorized to work on their equipment throughout the country. Everything, all music and sound dealers sent all sets back to Dallas for repair. There's not a wealth of information or service manuals or anything on these models. They're kind of hard to come by. That makes them trickier to work on. But like most things, they have certain inherent problems, and once you learn what those are, then you can figure out how to fix them. One of the inherent problems with these have to do with these switches. These are the room control switches, these are the intercom switches, and these are the phono, AM, FM, power, auto, something buttons. It's the ones that go here. So you got AM, FM phono, radio or tape input, auto on, off, and power on. These switches and the intercom, talk, listen, door on, talk, listen. These controls are all these controls, and like all switches like this, while they look like they're decent quality switches, they get hugely dirty. And as you can see, this set's not particularly clean. It's not horrible, but you know, dirty switches make things work poorly or intermittently. Like this particular set, the AM, FM phono switch, very hard to move. And the contacts are obviously very dirty. When I first powered it up, I had to wiggle and play with it and move it back and forth a zillion times to get the FM to stay on. So that's a normal, common problem, not just with music and sound, but with all switches. So this board is the board behind all these gold buttons, and this one is going to be interesting for me because one of the common problems on this model, or on all of these models from that time, and for those of you who watch my videos often, yes, I'm putting everything in a little cup because I don't have a lot of screws for these. In fact, I don't have anything for any of these. So we certainly don't want to lose things. Big standoff on this one. And there's a whole bunch of little washers. It's kind of nice they put lock washers on everything so screws don't come loose. It's just a nice little attention to detail. Oh, there it is. So one of the common problems with this model has to do with the switches on this board. And let's take this out and see what we have. Not exactly what I expected. So I originally thought, and what everybody used to talk about was, a lot of the problems with systems not operating correctly or not operating at all would be alive but nothing would function have to do with these switches. And we were always told that these were what are called bubble switches. And bubble switches are the types of switches that you see most commonly in early and mid 70s little hand calculators. You would have the number pad on the calculator and you would have little bubbles in the plastic, and you would push to enter numbers. You'd push the bubbles and it would make a connection and so forth. So what happens on those, and those were used like in NuTone, like in LB55 door chimes, they use a keypad that's actually was made by, I forget who made them now. Anyway, the bubbles go flat. They lose their seal and the bubble goes flat, so it's making a connection all the time. If you have enough bubbles that go flat, it's like someone doing this. They're pushing all the buttons at one time, and of course if you do that, then the set won't work correctly because it doesn't know what's going on. These are not bubble switches, at least they don't appear to be. These are some type of small tactile switch. But apparently they do fail because that was a common problem. Most of the time when we would send sets like this back to Music and Sound, they would replace all of these switches on this board, or perhaps the whole board, I don't know. That would solve the problem. So you've got all these switches. you've got some integrated circuits here, and this one, which is kind of an unusual package, and then some transistors and resistors. There's a couple inductors there and a bunch of diodes down here. So these, I believe, are driving the segments. This is an LED display driving the segments in the display, and then you've got all the switches. So to work on one of these and be successful, if it has a problem, you have to come up with replacement switches for this board, because these would be sealed units. And I'm not going to rip one of these off and take it apart yet, not until I see if I can find a replacement, because it has to be the same form factor. It has to be the same size. The stem has to stick out the same amount. It has to have the same spacing on the board here, and all of those kind of things. Otherwise, and it has this sort of cross hatch stem on it that fits the cap. So that could be challenging. I don't know. It's an interesting model, more washers. The other thing which is kind of nice about this is you've got the plastic faceplate here. It's upside down. But here you have a metal steel like chassis piece that everything attaches to, and it's held on to the back of the faceplate. I'm not going to take that apart now because I don't see any real point in doing that, but it would mean taking this all the way apart to clean it really well, and whatever wouldn't be terribly hard to do. So that's sort of roughly the initial look at a music and sound model N350, in maybe the possibility that these are sets that we could work on to repair. What it really comes down to is repairing the electronics and rebuilding it. Not that hard to do. There are some proprietary things in here, like this microprocessor, probably. I'll have to look this up and see exactly what it is, but that would be something. However, it always comes down to the proprietary parts that are the problem. These pots here, and then you have all the mechanical switches and all the mechanical buttons. So that in itself could be a problem, and it may make it really difficult to figure out a way to fix them and make them reliable. I don't think the tuner board would be much of an issue. So that's just the first go around on something like this. And I'll investigate into parts and other things as I have time, and you might see this again, and maybe we'll do a little work on it and see if we can clean it all up and make it work closer to new. I hope you found this interesting, and maybe for someone it will be helpful. If it is, please give it a thumbs up on YouTube, because that helps us just a little bit. There'll be a banner right here that shows you how to subscribe. Go to our YouTube homepage, click on the bell, and when you click on the bell, click on it to receive all notifications, and every time we post a new video, you'll get a notification and you can watch it. That's all for today. See you on the next video.